Greetings gamers, my name is Anto, welcome to another stream. In this evening's stream, holy moly, the music is loud in my ears. Need to turn that down. There we go. In this evening's stream, we're going to be doing a little bit of collaborative world building where we go back and forth between myself and you folks in the chat to help build out my world of the jewel cities of Talavar and the wider world of Ishtar. And we're going to be mainly doing that through the lens of a new monster generator that I am building. So I touched on this a little bit when I was teasing the stream earlier on today. But as I was getting ready for the stream and planning out what I wanted to do this evening, I realized that we're probably going to need to make some monsters this evening. And I wanted to make something funky and weird. And I thought, well, we might as well make a kind of custom solution for what I want to do. And once it's all finished, I'll make it available for the wider public as part of my GM toolkit, which is a freely available resource that I have. It's a big spreadsheet filled with different tools to help you as a game master be able to prep less and play more. So we're going to dive over to the spreadsheet view, and I've actually remembered that we need to do this in Google Sheets today so that it doesn't cause all kinds of flickering. And I have already started filling some of this in with some basic information and a bunch of like stream of consciousness notes that I was doing like 20 minutes before I had dinner this evening. But the goal of this is taking the concept of the monster builder that's in the Shadow Dark rulebook. So that takes a creature type, gives it some special qualities, some strengths and weaknesses, and then has a separate page for mutations. And I wanted to take that, expand on it, and also give it some mechanical weight within 5th edition so that we could use it in combination then with my quick monster builder, which gives you a set of stats that you can use for any CR to really quickly give your monsters their median abilities, their initiative and all their to hit bonuses, but also their monster abilities. So in this GM toolkit, there's this big list of monster abilities that covers not all, because not all of the monster abilities are published in the SRD, but all of the abilities that are published within the SRD, whether they're actions, traits, bonus actions, or reactions, are all printed in this monster ability list. So the goal with this weird monster builder is to be able to generate random monsters that you can then use as a source of inspiration. So for this example, we've ended up with an angelic themed elemental that is going to be doing above average damage as its strength, but is for some reason weak to bludgeoning damage. And then we have these mutation columns which all draw from the same list, and it'll draw 3 different mutations. You can either put all 3 of them in, choose one or two to give you a flavor for this creature. So if we have this angelic angel, I'd probably go with antlers and give it like a huge antlered presence, like horns. And then its signature ability would be aberrant ground. If we go into this toolkit here and find aberrant ground, which should be right at the top, right? You'd think, but not, because it's not ordered like that, is it? It's going to be in traits. It'll be a trait. That's why it won't be there. So we go and we find aberrant ground. There we go. So the ground in a 10-foot emanation originating from the monster is difficult terrain. So the signature ability is this angelic elemental, this elemental that might have wings and sort of all of these angelic properties, creates difficult terrain around it as part of its body. And then as a bonus action, it can leap. So part of the thing that this creature is doing is it's jumping around, and then it can deflect missiles as a bonus action. So taking all of that information together, or taking as much of it as we'd want, we then start to build out a monster from this and take anything that sparks our interest, or refresh the list if we don't get something that like gives us the vibes that we want and that kind of thing. Talk says, looking at this, it occurs to me it's a bit wild that D&D Beyond doesn't have a monster builder with monster feat list that you can quick select from. It is wild because it would be trivially easy for them to do. Like, I built this by basically trolling through D&D Beyond and copy pasting, so they already have all that information and have to put that information up to get it to work. So the fact that we don't have something like this, it does bother me, because it would be such a cool thing to have, and it would be a unique feature of D&D Beyond, and it would be a really easy thing for them to be like, hey, come and use D&D Beyond and you can make your own monsters. I get that the counter argument to that is, well, people wouldn't buy the books, but they would buy the books, because not everyone wants to make a monster from scratch and do that legwork. A lot of people do just want to be given a monster and to have it work. So going through this, there's a bunch of changes that I want to make to this sheet. Like I said, this is a very rough kind of initial draft that I put together really, really quickly. This came together in like 40-ish minutes. A lot of it was copy and pasting the abilities from this monster ability list and then mad typing. So it will be filled with typos and errors that will get ironed out eventually. But there are some things that I want to do, such as creature type. I would like to, by using duplicates, make some weighted creature types, so you're more likely to get certain creature types than others. Because, for example, while I've been running tests for this in the background while I was eating my dinner, I got ooze so many times, like an above average amount of times I got ooze. So I would like to go through and make it so that, like, just do something like put a bunch more beasts in there and a bunch more monstrosities than there are oozes, and then change the formula, because this is all based on formulas where it will choose a random option from the list. That's why all of the options are presented beneath, so that you as the GM, once you get hold of this, have the power to go in and tweak it and change it. So in the main portion of the GM toolkit, there is a note that talks about the formulas, how the formula works, and how to make those tweaks, because I want to empower the DM that is using this to go in and make those changes, because maybe you're running a game in a world that doesn't have the Fae or doesn't have celestial creatures. Well, you can go and take all of those out, and then you've got something that will always give you the results that you want. Or you could go in and get really specific for the game and the world that you're running. But we're starting with a baseline assumption of kind of like generic level D&D. So one of the things that I want to do is make sure that we have kind of a weighting of the creatures. and then I want to go through and expand a lot of the other columns, which is what I would like from you folks this evening, to throw ideas for things like the quality. So what I'm imagining for the quality is a modifier for the monster. So in this example, it would be a monstrosity, but it's a flaming monstrosity. For some reason, this thing is on fire. You know, that kind of stuff. So when you think of monster families and you get flaming skeletons, and you know, you get crystalline versions of different things, those are the kind of modifiers. I might change quality to modifier for now, because I think it expresses what I want it to do a little better. In terms of this column is you read it left to right. So the creature type is this type of creature. So in this case, it's on the screen. It is a plant, but then there's something elemental to it. So maybe it's been infused with elemental magic and that kind of things. Well, it's cool. Good evening. We are in the process of making a weird monster generator for 5th edition. So as part of my GM toolkit, making something that you can generate a monster that will give you a cool sounding monster with some weird mutations and some strength and weaknesses and some options for its abilities and stuff, so that you can use it in conjunction with the quick monster builder for all its stats, and very, very quickly build out a unique and custom monster. Talk says I make rollable tables unique for each set in our own, based off a list of kit bashed from God knows how many tools. So this is definitely something I'd steal from. Yeah, and that is the goal. Is I don't expect anyone. Well, a lot of people will run it as is, but I want to make sure that all of the stuff, all of the under the hood stuff, is visible and accessible, so that if you want to make those tweaks, it's easy to understand how to make them and how not to break the thing. So there's hence the instructions at the start of the kind of index page of the toolkit. So in terms of modifiers, we've got things like abyssal and angelic and elemental. So a lot of the creature types are repeated, so you can get that sort of twinned creature types. But then we've also got things like fungal or hive-minded. So you might have a beast that's a member of a hive mind, and then that can give you some interesting paths to take down, to go down with this creature, and then take inspiration from all of the other elements that you get. If we give it another refresh and see what we get. So a tumorous, oh no, it refreshes again. An oozy monstrosity. See, that's what I mean about ooze appearing way more than I would personally like. But an oozy monstrosity that could create illusory duplicates of itself, is weak to bludgeoning damage, has bark-like skin or hardened scales, has barbed hide as its ability. And if we go into monster abilities, and it will be in traits, that one, we can have a look at what barbed hide is. So at the start of each turn, you deal damage to the creature near it. So this is an oozy monstrosity that is able to deal damage next to it. And then its bonus action would be some kind of intelligence saving throw that prompted a condition on failure. So rather than going with specifics, first of all, I've gone with the 6 saving throws and then either conditions or damage. And then as a reaction, it can parry. We take any bits of those that we wanted. Isn't Abyssal the same as the demonic, unless we're talking subterranean of Abyssal Trench? Abyssal and demonic are going to be the same in some settings. Not all settings, though. And like I say, it might be subterranean abyssal. Like I said, a lot of this has been thrown together in like the 40 minutes before I had dinner this evening after I had the initial idea. So there's going to be repeats in these lists as well. I managed to catch a decent number of them because I did have a look through for repeats before starting the stream. Like Faceless appeared in like 4 or 5 of the columns. Like, I really like faceless monsters, it turns out. Like, it was a modifier, it was a strength and a weakness, and it was one of the mutations. I was like, no, it only needs to be one of these things. So it ended up as just a modifier. But Abyssal and Demonic, depending on how your setting looks, could be the same, might be different. For me, when I think of Abyssal, I think of a more like primal demon versus the kind of demon. So the mutation 2 and 3 columns are empty because all 3 of these draw from this one list. So you get 3 options for mutations, but they all draw from the same list. So you can see here, it will give you occasionally the same option, but it gives you the ability to choose one that you like, or 2 or 3, or ignore them and re-roll. And I might present it differently at the end, might kind of triple the options, break them down into 3 distinct columns. But while I'm working on it, it's easier to add new options to just one column. Yeah, so like really old demons, that's kind of what I think of when I think of Abyssal, kind of a different level of demonic evil. But we've got all kinds of options in the modifiers, so like amphibious, ancient, angelic, arachnid. There's a lot of, what would the word be? Taxonomic? Is that the word for it? Like a lot of modifiers that speak to the kind of physical appearance of a creature. So you can have a beast, and a beast might be like a wolf. Well, that wolf could be an amphibious wolf. Well, what does that amphibious wolf look like? Or it could be a flaming wolf. And, you know, you apply those different modifiers to that creature, and that's a really simple and easy way to very quickly just get something that feels very different. And you could use the modifier to just take a monster that you want to run, or take an existing monster and run it through this kind of option. So let's do it. Let's do that. If we set our source to the new monster manual, and let's say our challenge rating is going to be 4. Let's say we've got a hippopotamus, because it's where my mouse landed. So we've got a hippopotamus as our option, and we run it through this. So we end up, again, see how elemental has come up more times than it should, given that there's only one entry. So I might stack the modifiers so that some of them come up more than others as well. But if we give it another refresh, a bioluminescent hippopotamus that burrows. So in addition to being able to swim and hold its breath, this bioluminescent hippopotamus can burrow, but its weakness is that it deals below average damage, and it has the mutation of either bone plating, sawtooth teeth, or feathered wings, or all of them in any combination. I would go for bone plating as a natural armor for this, because the vibe I'm getting for this is that this hippopotamus has come across some kind of like magical radiation or something, either underground or leaking from underground, and it has been changed. It wasn't born like this, it was mutated specifically like that. So now it can burrow, and it's growing these armor plates, and it's bioluminescent and glows from within, because it's been kind of feeding off this magical kind of chemical runoff. And just by doing that, I'm immediately getting vibes for an entire adventure of perhaps there is a magical brewery or a wizard's laboratory or something like that that's dumping this magical pollutant into the water, and it's impacting this hippo, and this hippo has become mutated as a result of it. And then in terms of signature abilities, then being able to detect intelligence, that would tie really well into the Feywild, giving them this otherworldly intelligence that they can like peer into people and like detect intelligences. And then for a bonus action, having a hippo being able to leap on you, like pounce on you, that would be pretty terrifying. And then giving it a counterattack as a reaction, so if it is attacked, it can attack back using its reaction. And very quickly, it builds up you get a simple monster. Like, I would never run a hippo in my game, but I would definitely run a bone-plated, bioluminescent, Feywild magic hippo that has been, like, mutated from the runoff of some sort of magical chemical plant or something, because that is awesome. And that is the whole point of this like weird monster generator. You either build one from scratch and you take all of the information from this, or you find a monster that sits in the CR that you want, or that would fit the location or the vibe that you're going for, and then you run it through this, and it gives you something way more interesting than you would have come up with, or you most likely would have come up with on your own. Because I would never have come up with a bioluminescent bone-plated hippo that can like jump around like some weird giant rabbit. And I think that is, especially if you're running campaigns where you have regions of your world where things are weird, you know, there's a lot of usefulness and a lot of utility in something like this. I mean, I'd be terrified of a hippo in real life. You know, I couldn't run fast enough to get away from a hippo in real life. But in terms of the landscape of D&D, by the time you're level 4, a hippo, really speaking, is just a sack of hit points. Like, it makes 2 bite attacks that aren't really that powerful. Like, what's the average damage at level 4? Let's have a look at the quick monster builder and look at the damage. So the average damage at CR4 is 30. It's doing 16, so it's doing 2 points of damage above the average. So it's doing average damage, and it's got 82 hit points. So it's slightly above average hit points, but it has nothing else going on for it other than being able to hold its breath. So unless you're fighting it in the water, I don't think a hippo is in any way frightening to a typical D&D party, because most normal beasts, once you get past 2nd or 3rd level, I think, aren't frightening because, you know, the players exist in a world of magical creatures. So being able to take a generator like this that can add those weird mutations and weird tweaks to a creature and take what otherwise would have been a fairly standard or an uninteresting combat to the players, and add a little spice to it without having to do really all too much, because all you'd have to do is give it the leap bonus action. Like, you give it these 3 abilities, the text of which is within the GM toolkit, so you don't even have to go and find these things off. And then it's just visual differences, you know, so it's an easy process to do. What things would you give a beast mutated by the Shadowfell? That's a really good question. So let's have a look. Let's go to... I'm immediately thinking of Van Richten's. Yeah, Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, and what monsters we have in that. And I can't remember whether there are monsters in that, to be perfectly honest. There are horror monsters. Let's have a look at some of the creatures that we get in that. as a kind of starting point. The Granishkas, the boneless. So boneless, I think, is an option in one of these. Is it in a mutation? Boneless body. Yeah, boneless body's in there. As well as that, there is a number of like the horror-y options in the mutations and strengths and weaknesses. So the weaknesses, classic kind of folklore-y weaknesses. So weakness to salt or silver, can't cross running water or can't enter holy ground, things like that. And then in strengths, one of them's got one of the strengths is something to do with a shadow. Yeah, no shadow, which could be a strength, could be a weakness, depending on how you want to interpret it. I would imagine it'd probably be a weakness more than it would be a strength. I might move that to a weakness, because unless you have lore tied to your shadows, then just not having a shadow would probably tip the players off that thing is not normal because it doesn't cast a shadow. But then in mutations, we have things like the boneless body, a number of like physical mutation, fangs and horns. I say fangs, but I don't think I have added fangs, so let's get fangs in there. There's like wing arms, so bat-like wings. No shadow could be a strength for ambush predators, that is true. Having things like your blood dealing damage as well is a common kind of horror trope, like Alien style. A lot of regeneration options, the possession of other things, as well as moving through other things. So being able to move through creatures and objects and mirrors specifically, because there's a lot of folklore around mirrors and stuff like that. So I like splitting off some of those little folklore elements to kind of pay homage to those folklore aspects. I remember seeing a homebrew take on a barbarian where it gets different maneuvers like the Battlemaster, but stuff like different concoctions and bone breaking strikes and all give you negatives to roll like your ability checks and so on. Yeah, I've seen a bunch of different options for giving maneuver style stuff to different classes. It's one of the common homebrew things to give more maneuvers to more martials. That's why we got the what they're called weapon masteries in D&D 24, which is one of the most forgotten things in my campaign. My players never remember about any of the things that their weapon masteries could do. But looking at some of the options for maneuvers and weapon masteries and things could be a good option for adding abilities and stuff like that. All martials having maneuvers, it's like I say, it's one of those things that I think if the system has it baked in as a whole and the players are used to it and expect it, it works well. In my experience with D&D 24, most of the players that I've run 24 in just forget about them because they're used to 2014 version. So it's only sort of every 2 or 3 sessions that they remember the weapon masteries exist, and they're like, oh yeah, we can do these extra things with our weapons. But they're all playing, or most of the people that I've run 24 with have been sort of casters or half casters, so not super martial forward. So it could be a completely different story if I had a party of pure martial characters. But in terms of strengths, being immune to a bunch of different conditions and immune to a bunch of different damages is in the strengths. Having options for being above average for AC and damage and hit points and things like that. Being able to spider climb, all of those kind of things pretty standard strengths, and then you get more esoteric stuff. So like the creature can't be killed unless it's burned or decapitated, or like you have to do this specific thing to get rid of the creature. Those take a creature much more into a folklore-y detective direction, I think. If you have a creature that you have to interact with in a certain way, it takes it much more down the realm of folklore. Like, as in Philander's memory abilities to mine. So I have one player that has a great sword and always forgets to use grace on it. It's like, but for the most part, it's not been a huge problem, because I think that player characters in 24 have had a bump generally in power level anyway, so missing out on the weapon masteries hasn't proved to be a huge problem for the players when they've forgotten it, and when they remember it, it's just a nice little bonus. So in terms of mutations, a lot of the mutations are specifically physical things. So third eye, and I made a little note to myself for like true sight, like maybe gives it true sight, and then a bunch of other physical options: antlers, antennas, bone plating, horns, extra heads, extra eyes, all that kind of stuff. Fangs, 3 heads specifically, because you often get mythological creatures that have got 3 heads. Talons. A lot of these will overlap with the kind of things that a monster might have anyway, which is part of the reason why I chose to keep the sort of 3 mutations that the Shadow Dark weird element has, so that you have more of an option that at least one of them will be relevant to you as you're generating a character. So like an abyssal dragon with the strength is above average to hit bonus, but that's weak to cold iron, but has a third eye that grants it true sight, a forked tongue, an extra head. Maybe the second head is cyclopean, so it's got 2 eyes on one head and then a second head that is cyclopean, and that's the one that's true sighted. Then it gets elemental restoration. I think that's the one where if it takes a certain kind of elemental damage, that restores its hit points. And then it has a bonus action ability that allows it to trigger a strength-based saving throw or impart a condition. I'd probably do a strength-based saving throw or grapple, and then its reaction is some kind of parry. So like if someone goes in to attack it, maybe a second head can come in and parry the attack, and immediately that creates just an interesting dragon. I think that you could take a pretty standard, you could just choose what kind of damage type you wanted. Say you want fire, cool, you just take a red dragon, you bump its hit points just a little bit, give it a weakness to cold iron that you introduce to the players through a lore dump at some point. Give it true sight, and then give it the 3 new traits and actions, and you could just write those on a post-it note and stick them in your monster manual, and you could run that monster with very little prep for it. Like abyssal, hit points plus, weak cold iron, 2 heads, bracket true sight, and then elemental restoration, grapple, bonus action, reaction parry, sticky note, straight onto the dragon. And just away you go. Don't have to write a whole new stat block for it. Elscool says, I would really love it if they could make more conditions tied to just normal physical attacks to make weapons in weapon shapes and maneuvers to make normal enemies more interesting. So there are a decent amount of kind of physical based conditions that the monsters have. So if we go into monster abilities and go into, let's go, for example, I'm struggling to think of one immediately, but a decent number of the just normal men have quite interesting stuff that they can do. There's a bunch of I can't remember whether it is things like the spy master is actually not a terrible one. Spy master gets a smoke bomb, con save to do poison damage, and it gives him the blinded condition as an action. But there's a bunch of that style of monster that gets sort of options to grapple or knock prone, and a lot of that has just been baked into the attack. So typically, if it's single target attack as part of the attack action in a monster now, it will automatically apply the condition. Excuse me, unless the condition is like paralyzed or petrified. And then if it's multi-target condition as part of the attack action, that's when you start triggering saving throws. But a lot of the single target kind of save and throw stuff that's baked into the action in 24 just goes off. So like the wolf will just automatically knock prone and stuff like that now. And that being baked into the stat block makes it much easier to balance the numbers, because you know that this creature will always be able to do that, so it will much more reliably always be doing kind of this bracket of damage, which made it much easier to make the quick monster builder, because the kind of the assumptions that you make about the numbers are much flatter than they were in 2014. I've been using my quick monster builder now for however long the monster manual has been out, and pretty much any time I've made a monster with it, it has performed pretty much exactly within the bounds that I would expect for the CR that it is for, which has been really useful. So it's like now this weird monster generator is like the third pillar of this. You take the quick monster builder if you want the stats, the monster ability list if you want to get into the nitty-gritty of the specific mechanical context of what they're doing, and then the weird monster generator to just be like, here's what this thing looks like, or here's how this existing monster has been mutated and changed. And so far it seems to be working well. Like an astral construct, like some sort of manufactured creature that comes from the stars. Awesome. Immediately love that vibe. It's got an above average AC, so because it's a construct, I'm immediately thinking, cool, it's some kind of like heavily armored option. It's weak to lightning damage, which makes sense in my brain for it being a constructed creature. And then it's got sawtooth teeth, and that being there twice, I'm immediately thinking like buzzsaw blades for hands. Its signature ability is Berserk, which means that when it drops to bloodied, which is half hit points, there's a chance it'll just attack whatever's closest, which makes a lot of sense for kind of an enthralled creature, like a construct that is like a robot servant. So like an android that is serving some spacefaring master. And then some bonus action thing that is a constitution save or damage. So some sort of emanation is immediately what I would think. Some cosmic emanation or some mechanical emanation, either like a billowing smoke or like it's got a radioactive cosmic reactor in its chest, and it can like vent the energy from that, and anything within 5 feet has to succeed on the DC based that we would set on the quick monster builder for its level, and then take an amount of damage that would be in line with its per round damage based on the quick monster builder. And then its reaction would be counterspell. Makes sense to me as being like a spacey robot that is the servant of some space wizard. If I was a wizard, I'd want my servants to be able to cast counter spells so that I'm not having to do it. Awesome. And being able to make interesting creatures like that really quickly on the fly. I think there's a lot of value to that. Rel says, so this builder being a book that you're making, probably at some point. Initially, this is just going to be made freely available in my GM toolkit. So my GM toolkit is available for free to anyone that signs up for my email newsletter. I don't know if I have a link to that. Yes, I do have a link to my website, which has a link to the page where you can get the newsletter. So you can get a copy of this spreadsheet that won't have the weird monster generator in it currently because it's not finished. But once that is finished, I will be putting out an update to the newsletter subscribers to be like, hey, this is finished. You can get that now. And this whole thing is packed with just a ton of options. So we've got a blank calendar, we've got a point of interest generator, which follows the same convention. It's got a bunch of names and options. So this is the Dead Oasis, an abandoned castle that is occupied by some humans that are having trouble from some constructs, and the nearby resource to them is platinum. And you can use that to help populate your map and come up with different plot hooks for your players. Then there's a settlement generator, which will give you just 10 UK-based kind of settlement names, as well as then a full settlement list. So it'll give you the name, the town, the type, so whether it's a town, a city, a hamlet, all that kind of stuff. What the size of it is, the government type, all that kind of stuff. Same with the dungeon room generator, so where the dungeon is, what the type is, what kind of rooms are in it, all that kind of stuff. Plot hook generator, so a construct who was created by a long dead mage. We're getting a lot of construct stuff this evening. Was given the final order to protect the facility where they were created. They still carry out this order even though their body is beginning to deteriorate. And the featured monster in this adventure, the thing that the players would have to fight against, would be a beast. And then their reward would be a king's ransom in gold coins. And note the little parentheses that is coins, comma high, and that is for the Dungeonomics page. And this is a whole kind of rebuild of the 5e economy so that players aren't having to spend like 800,000 gold on magic items and stuff, but it has an adventure reward section which will give you a breakdown of if your party's level 5 and you're getting a high value reward, each player should get about 64 gold per player for that reward and that kind of stuff. So a lot of the generators and stuff talk to each other. And then the quick monster builder, our weird monster builder, and the other options in the monster abilities, and then just some adventure planning templates. So a whole bunch of just really useful stuff for GMs. I'm not from the UK, so F me, lol. Yeah, I mean, if you're not using sort of standard Fantasyland naming conventions in your world, which tends to default to be quite UK centric, then the place name element of the settlement generator is going to be much less useful, because like I said, the goal here is to make it so that the standard player is going to be able to pull from this without too many changes. But otherwise, there is, if we go all the way over to the end, you can see there is the column that shows the place names, and that is what the what's the word? The formula. My brain is not working. The formula is based on. So if you don't want to use UK based names and you have an alternative list, you can just paste it in and change the formula so it draws from that list, and then it will give you the kind of names that you like. That goes in all of the generators. Like, it's very open source in that sense, as all of the information is very easy to change, with the exception of the quick monster builder, because it was built specifically off the whole of the monster manual. So can't share the whole of the like the underlying math of it, because not the whole monster manual is within the SRD. and then Dungeonomics, because that is just me breaking down and rebuilding the economy. But pretty much everything else is very like open sourcey and can be changed within the toolkit. So in terms of signature abilities, so we've got pretty much all of the traits and like a good amount of the action options from the monsters' ability lists. So things like them being amorphous or having the greater magic resistance and things like that. All of those are just copied from the monster abilities list. And then a list of just various breath weapons of different damage types. So wishes, that is from the Tao, I believe, but grants wishes is an easier way to interpret that. I will probably go through and kind of curate that list a little bit and make some interesting and evocative ones that aren't necessarily tied to the ability list directly, but that you could read and immediately like understand how you are supposed to use that without having to do too much work. So if we go ahead and let's go and refresh until we get an option that we've not had before, because we get a lot of elementals. Cool. So an ancient beast that can duplicate itself, is weak to radiant damage, and then if we go into this and start making notes of an ancient beast can duplicate itself, can duplicate illusory, that's not right, weak to radiant, and then blooded fury, saving throw damage, and parry. Bloodied fury, saving throw damage, parry, and then let's have a look and see what mutations we want to give this thing. So this is some kind of beast. It's incredibly ancient. I like the idea of it having scaled hides and 3 heads. Those 3 heads, scaled hide. So then we just need to come up with a beast. So if we jump over to the monster list on D&D Beyond, if we can get the damn thing to work, we can pick out a beast, and we'll set our source to be Monster Manual again. And for this, I want to take specifically a mundane beast. So I want to cap us out at about 4 for the CR, so that we get more of those mundane beasts initially, and then we can really focus in on the ancient aspect of it. So a bear is a cool option. A 3-headed ancient bear, that's an option for it. I'm picturing this as something that would be in a dungeon or in some kind of like powerful site, some place of power, and I think bear fits for that quite well. Or a lizard could be cool, especially if you're in like a desert setting, a giant 3-headed lizard, like a Komodo dragon style thing. Hell yeah, actually that's sick. Yeah, let's go 3-headed Komodo dragon. So this ancient 3-headed Komodo dragon thing that can create illusory copies of itself has this scaled hide, so it's going to have higher AC, is weak to radiant damage, which to me says it's either going to have connections to necrotic or sort of unholy elements, and then has the blooded fury ability, has some kind of bonus action that prompts a saving throw and deals damage, and then has the parry ability. So then if we take this stat block that I have prepared here and copy that over, and insert a page break. So we get that on a new page, and get our ancient Komodo dragon. Then we can start filling in some of these details. So we just arbitrarily pick a CR. I'm going to say CR8 for this, given that the giant lizard is like less than CR1. So CR8. So our median ability modifiers are going to be a +4, +3, 2 +2s, and 2 +1s. So I'm going to make a note of that. 4, 3, 4, 3, 2, 2, 1, 1. And as we go through and build it, we'd assign those modifiers to the stat block depending on where you go through to get it. In terms of the options for resistances, immunities, weaknesses, that kind of thing, we know that it's weak to radiant. So we put damage, weakness, and then put that as radiant. Or it'd be vulnerability. Yeah, it'd be vulnerability, wouldn't it? It's fine. And then we know that it would have the Bloodied Fury ability. So if we go into monster abilities and look for Bloodied Fury. So while bloodied, the creature has advantage on attack rolls. And that is a trait. So we'd go into traits, we'd add Bloodied Fury. And then we just put while bloodied. Creature has advantage on attack rolls. And then we have something that does save and throw based damage in the bonus action. Given the sort of Komodo dragon and the sort of poisonous, kind of venomous vibes of the Komodo dragon, I'm thinking maybe like an acid spit option within bonus action, like a single target acid spit that you can save and throw to get out of the way of. So something like spit acid, and it would be a dexterity saving throw, and then the DC would be whatever the DC is on our quick monster builder for CR8. So we go over to save DCs, which for CR8 would be 15. So DC 15. So on failure, they'd take an amount of damage, which would be acid damage. So it'd be X acid damage. And then success, half damage. Reactions, we'd get the parry, we just copy the parry in, and then we add like a bite, a couple of swipes, a tail attack, and very quickly we can build out a large three-headed Komodo dragon, ancient Komodo dragon stat block that we could then tie into some kind of adventure. And we look at it and we go, right, why is it weak to radiant? And if we decide that it's going to be the kind of connection of that celestial kind of religious connotation, well, maybe there's a cult vibe to this. Maybe there is a cult of worshippers for this ancient giant three-headed Komodo dragon, and we tie that in, and suddenly you have more than just your simple monster. You've got a whole kind of full-on adventure that you could build out to be something that you could put in front of the players very, very quickly. I'm sure that D&D hasn't had land crocodiles and put them in game as standard monsters for when most of our planet's history we had them. There were a lot more options for like were crocodile. I think were crocodile's the only option, like really land-based croc, because there's a couple of crocodile options in the base rules, but most of their stuff really does assume that they're going to be in the water. There's the crocodile. I think there's giant crocodile as well. I think it's giant crocodile that has the death roll. I think. Does it have the death roll? No, it doesn't even have the death roll. Ugh, so disappointing. That is something that I think 4th edition did really, really well, is that almost every monster type got a, even if it was quite a small selection, they got a selection of creatures and stat blocks associated with it. So always had interesting options to play with the archetype of a creature. So if you had a crocodile, you might have multiple different crocodiles that serve different purposes, so that you could be like, oh, my players are this level, I fancy throwing a crocodile at them, but I don't want to just give them the basic crocodile, where I could give them this giant mutated crocodile and that kind of stuff. And that's part of what I want to, that's part of the vibe that I want to recreate here, is to give easier tools to remake that. Because as much as I do enjoy the monsters from the new monster manual, I do think that almost without exception they are an improvement, except for the were creatures. The were creatures are just flat worse, but for the most part they are an improvement over 2014's. I wish that there was more variety among the monster families, and there's better variety than there was in 2014. I just miss 4th edition's monster variety. Like, I miss a lot about 4th edition. Like, I yearn for 4th edition in many ways. Why has Blooded Fury done that? Is it? It's because I'm searching. Right, okay. I was very confused. I thought I'd broken everything. So, next thing that I want to do is I want to figure out what weighting we want for creature types. So the number of creatures that we have is 14 different creature types. So I definitely want oozes and elementals to be less frequent. Let's rearrange them by kind of where I want their frequency to be. So beasts and monstrosities I definitely want up there to be the kind of thing that it's going to suggest the most. I like aberration, because I think aberration is an interesting thing, especially if you're modifying it with a second column. So I would probably want more aberrations than elementals and oozes, even though it may not necessarily make full sense. Dragons, I would probably maybe a little bit lower than elemental and oozes. Fiends, I think, are a decent one, and giants are a decent one to have a number of, and humanoids. There, we've got the 2 issues of plants there, and then let's move that down here. Fiends and celestials should probably be on the same level in their own little category. Plants, constructs, and fae, I think, can probably be on the same as well. Around the same amount. Elemental and oozes. Dragons and aberrations. So let's just go real simple, and we're going to make it so that we can have twice as many constructs, plants, and fae as aberrations, elementals, and oozes. And then let's go so we can do like 3 times as many celestials and fiends. And then let's go 4 times on there. And we'll whack it up with 5 on there and get a vibe for how it should feel then. I think constructs should be more monstrosity level. I mean, we can put constructs in monstrosity level. We got, let's go, so if we're going 5, 2, god damn it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We can make constructs a little more common. So we got 2. There are 2 at the minute. We can bump them up to like a 4, and then sort that. How do you sort in Google Sheets? Data, isn't it? It's going to be sort range column A to B. Cool. And then this is up to 39. We adjust the formula, and there we go. So now we should get way less oozes, way fewer oozes, and proportionally more of the interesting stuff. Not necessarily interesting stuff, but let's have a refresh a couple times and see how it feels. So an arachnid monstrosity, that's cool. I like that. A plant-like plant, as is always the case with this form of generation, you're always going to run into stuff like that. But I like when that happens, because rather than refresh, my mind is like, okay, how do we make the most planty plant that's ever planted? And how do we take all of the other elements of it and use all of that together and try and really play up the plant elements of it? So like this plant creature that can move through living creatures, straight away I'm thinking it would move through living creatures in a similar fashion to the cordyceps, that fungus, that zombie fungus. Eyes on stalks. When I think of cordyceps, I'm thinking ants and the stalks poking out of them, so that fits for me. Ethereal sight, I think I would rationalize that as being this kind of fungal element. This like magical cordyceps is an ethereal creation. And then the strength saving throw or take damage, I'd probably change that to a constitution saving throw and have it as something else, or maybe keep it as strength. And then I probably would drop the reaction, or potentially go for something like split and have the option to split into others, or something along those lines. In my head, it should be on par with fiends or more common, because hey, they're sort of general fiend type. I mean, fiend, we've got fiends 3 times in the list, and construct is 4 times. So a little bit more common than fiends. A little bit less common than beasts and monstrosities. About on par with humanoids. Obviously, really speaking, humanoid would be like 90% of the list, but that's not as interesting to have all of your monsters be humanoids. And another one of the benefits of doing it in this kind of open source style is that if someone gets their hands on this and they're like, I don't like the number of fae that there are in this list, I want there to be 8 times more fae because my entire adventure takes place in the Feywild. Cool, you can just swap it all out for fae. There's no problem. But yeah, like an ethereal cordyceps, and this plant is like a spore carrier, and it spreads them through damage, so it's moving through other creatures. You know, that's not something that I would have arrived on myself, sitting in like a vacuum in a white room trying to come up with a monster. I'd have never gotten, or I can't imagine that I'd have gotten there on my own. It's why I love random tables and generators like this so much, because their weird idiosyncrasies force you to, or provided that you like get on board with it, they force you to think in really small tight boxes, and they can make for some really interesting monsters as a result. Let's give it another refresh, keep feeling out the vibe for this. So a hive-minded monstrosity, so a magical creature that's hive-minded. We're getting a lot of can duplicate itself illusory. I don't know why it loves picking that so much. Eyes on stalks. That's giving me like hive-minded displacer beast, and then advanced telepathy, and on reaction it can split itself. So I would probably say the first place I go with that is tapping into the lore of the displacer beast and its like historic connection to the Quirrell. I don't actually know how to pronounce it because I've never heard it spoken. The mythical beast that they're based on, that they and the four Valaka are also based on, and creating some kind of displacer beast plus that allows them to control a hive mind of displacer beasts. That could be really cool. You've got all the different types of humanoid in the game and how weird they are, like Tree Preen and the penguin people. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of weird humanoid people, like the Loxodon. Just, yeah, there's some real weird humanoids. I suppose that when I see humanoid, my brain just goes to humanoid rather than thinking of all the like absolute wild stuff that there is within the kind of scope of D&D. Let's have another couple of refreshes and see if we can get another interesting poll. Looking specifically at the combination of creature and modifier for this. A patchwork humanoid. I like that again. I don't understand why we keep getting... That's why we keep getting, because I haven't expanded. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, that's my bad. So 59. So we keep getting that one because I hadn't actually expanded the thing to be the whole thing. There we go. So I'm staying on the patchwork humanoid and we'll go for the rest because a patchwork humanoid was very interesting to me. So patchwork humanoid with legendary resistances. Makes sense if there's some kind of Frankenstein creature that they have already overcome death. Weak to force damage, and their mutations are a split jaw. Maybe their face is made up of like multiple faces. No eyes and slimy skin. Like that trio of mutations, excuse me, along with being a patchwork humanoid. Ugh. And then their signature ability being abduction immediately starts painting a really horrific picture of what this creature is used for. That's real gnarly. I like that. Let's make sure that all of these are given the right numbers so that we're actually getting the proper polls from them. 71. And then this should be down to 136. See, it's not giving us the full gamut. Made silly mistake. 136. And then this is 27, which is right, and this is 14, which is right. I watch so much stuff on D&D, more sort of head is full of weird stuff. Yeah, there's some real weird stuff. Like, especially kind of 3rd edition and prior. 3rd edition especially, because there was so much released for 3rd edition. I feel like the lore really bloated out in 3rd edition. But man, there's been some real weird stuff published for D&D. So this poll, we've got a stone carved monstrosity. That's cool. That burrows, is weak to acid damage, and then the mutations are either a chitinous shell, a serpentine lower body, or iron hard scales. I like either a chitinous shell or a serpentine lower body. And then its signature ability is gibbering, similar to the gibbering mouther. And then a bonus action option that is a charisma saving throw or take damage, and the reactions deflect missiles. I think I'd probably ignore the reaction on this one, because the vibe I'm getting is a statue in some kind of temple that has come to life through magic. I know that would be like a construct or maybe an elemental, but that is the vibe I'm getting from the options that were presented here. Some statue of some monstrous creature that has come to life and can burrow through the tunnels of the dungeon and emerge out of the walls. And let's have a look at what the gibbering option does. Gibbering. So well, it doesn't have the incapacitated condition. And a creature that starts its turn within 20 feet, they fail, and then they might do nothing. So it has the option to interact with the player character's ability to make actions and do stuff. So thinking of that from the point of view of this statue that's come to life in this dungeon, the way I'd probably represent that is through some sort of like cult-like chanting. So have this statue of, I'm thinking like a serpentine representation of some kind of serpent god, thinking like end game of against the cult of the reptile god, that kind of vibe. This fresco that has come to life and is burrowing through the floor and the walls of the dungeon with its like either chitinous shell or iron hard scales and a serpentine lower body, and it's mechanically got the gibbering, but in game it's represented through this chant that is part of the cult within this ancient temple to try and bring back their deity. And if the players are within the emanation, they might do nothing or they might go mad. And then the charisma saving throw for bonus damage would probably just be like psychic damage. So it would like speak ancient kind of cosmic truths into their mind or something like that to drive them mad. And again, it's just cool stuff that I would otherwise not come up with on my own, which makes it just an awesome option. So I think that I'm happy with where it is provisionally, happy enough that we can jump into Legend Keeper and actually use it, because the main reason that I wanted to put this together is my players are going to be traveling in our next session. They're going to be leaving the city that they've been in up until this point, the city of Visoka, and traveling along this coastal road to ultimately end up in the city of Lastwatch. And I want them to have some interactions along the way, and next week I probably want them to interact with some kind of monster. And they are level 4 currently, which means that they, really speaking, should be interacting with CR 4 or 5 creatures if we want them to fight a solo monster, if we want them to have a kind of tentpole encounter where they're fighting something memorable and it's, you know, a big beastie rather than a bunch of minions. And I was looking through the options of level 4 and 5 creatures, and just nothing was jumping out at me as being particularly interesting. So I figured I probably want to make a monster for this encounter, and that's where we ended up with this generator idea from, because I was like, if I'm gonna make a monster, I might as well mechanize the ability to make it and make it available for everyone. So let's have a look at the kind of stuff that they could interact with here and see whether anything jumps out as being potential to change. Like the hippo option. The hippo option was a pretty good option. So if there are any other like creatures or like triceratops, maybe some kind of trolls are always a really good pick, I think, because you can get a lot of different kinds of trolls and you can explain away why they might be mutated for all kinds of magical weirdness reasons. I think a lot of like the Zorn and the Remoraz are probably too specific to go and apply changes to. But something like a troll or a triceratops, I'd probably go troll over triceratops, and then maybe a bullet, but I feel probably troll over a bullet. But let's do a generation for a troll and see what sticks out, if anything. And if nothing sticks out, then we'll make a completely normal monster. Normal monster, like we'll do the whole thing. So this won't work for troll because trolls don't heal from fire damage, and this one does. So we want to refresh until we get something that works. So a faceless troll with genius intellect, it's weak to bludgeoning damage, and then either has a boneless body, iron hard scales, or feathered wings, is transparent. If we went boneless body, that would work with transparent, but why is it a troll? And then can split itself. That's a really interesting creature, just without it being a troll. Like a faceless genius intellect creature that is boneless and transparent and can split itself when it becomes bloodied. I don't know what this creature is, but it's cool. I think that might be the pick. So let's see whether we can paste those options in. Paste unlinked. Yeah, that does work. At least enough so I know it's there. So we've got some kind of monstrosity, not necessarily married to the monstrosity idea. The vibe I get is from the other elements, the vibe I get is humanoid. A faceless humanoid, the result of some kind of magical experiment or something gone wrong or a curse or something like that, where they are, I don't know how the genius intellect is going to come into it just yet, but this transparent boneless body that splits when they reach the bloodied condition is very interesting to me, because that would be so frustrating to fight, especially with genius intellect, because that means that we could potentially have multiple of this creature already in play when the players are introduced to it within the narrative. Let's say that this thing is going to be some kind of like serial killer type archetype. It could already have split itself multiple times, and they could come to a village and hear kind of folk tales of the legend of the see-through men, or like these boneless, like not quite ghosts that seem to be multiplying throughout the mountains, and they have to go and investigate that and find out that they're just consistently splitting. Every time the village like rises up against one and bloodies it, it splits and one of them runs off. That could be definitely, there's definitely something to that, and I will make some kind of note on the map for that. So we're going to go and drop a pin, and I'm going to link it to a new page, and we're going to call it The Boneless Men. Link this to a page called The Boneless Men and create. Why did you not create? that is... This should not be happening. Right, there we go. Don't know why that was such a struggle. And then we want this to be some kind of monster. And we will change the pin to be red, because that is what the pins usually are. That is the wrong color red, though. Yeah, that feels like it should be a more orangey red. Something more like that. A bit lighter. Yeah, there we go. Something like that. I've just set the zoom level wrong. I've made like 8 million pins. It's fine. It's not a problem. And we want to make it shield so it matches all of the others. And then close that. And then go in and start removing all of the pins that we made too many of. And then copy that and put that in here. There we go. So I don't know if I'm committed to the boneless men as the full option. So we'll go and we'll generate out another option just to be safe. Why are you asking me to leave? Yes. Cool. So this is giving us another like duplication one, which I'm not down for. So we'll keep going until we get something that I'm interested in. So an astral plant, a plant from space. I'm getting immediate like, is it outside the color purple? The color. What's the? I cannot remember the author name or the actual name of the story. All I remember is the awful film adaptation with Nick Cage. Alien plant, immune to lightning damage, weak to acid damage, has extremely long limbs, like tunneling into the ground, spreading, learning, signature ability of abduction, and then gets spell type stuff, so some kind of spell casting plant. That could be interesting. I like the idea of a plant from another world or another realm that has come into this one and is like burrowing its long arms through the ground to learn, and is like abducting people so that it can learn from them. And people have been going missing, and perhaps the players could find a location and ultimately fight this plant, and the plant would have, and it would be like a Vecna lair from Stranger Things, have all of the people kind of cocooned around it. That could be an interesting one. The color from outer space, I'm pretty sure that's the story that I was thinking. So that is an option that could work. I think it's the color from it is the color of outer space. Color out of space. So that's another option that we can go and make. Why do you not want to pin? There we go. Color out of space. Create link. Create link. And then click on it. Monster template. And then don't know why that is not updating like it should. Legend Keeper is being a little bit weird. Because it should. Oh, there we go. Sync with page. That's why. So this should be, there we go, color out of space. We'll do the same thing. We'll copy the options and paste them into there. And then what I would do is just go in at the later date and expand this. So I'd go and click on these pins and look at the options that I've put in. So an astral plant that's immune to lightning damage and has extremely long limbs and is using them to abduct people, and I can cast these spells and build the adventure around that. Raf, welcome in. Good evening. Joined us just at the tail end of doing a bunch of work on this generator to make weird and eccentric monsters. So I'm just refreshing through a bunch and seeing what it gives us. So as this example, a tumorous humanoid that deals damage when they're attacked, so their blood deals damage, but they are weak to sunlight. They have an unhinging jaw, and then their signature ability is the vile appearance. They have a charisma-based saving throw that imparts a condition, and their reaction is to split. Again, I'd probably drop the split reaction from this, but the rest of it, I'm getting real kind of vampiric vibes of kind of like the strain, or the like leaning into the infectious element of vampirism. Agile Monk, welcome in. Raf says, wow, is this sheet available? This will be available when it's done. This has only existed for about 4 hours. So once it's polished up and refined, it is going to go into my Game Master's Toolkit, the one that is available on the website. Did a bunch of lights just flash, or am I going mad? I'm not going mad. Thank you very much, Agile Monk. Much appreciated. So this tumorous element, like, and that combination with, I didn't mean to bop you, so sorry, with their blood dealing damage, I'm thinking of like multiple growths on their body that when you attack them, the growths explode, and then their blood has some infectious element to it that deals damage to you. The weak to sunlight element gives me vampirism straight away, as does the unhinging jaw. I'm immediately getting like Hellboy, not Hellboy 2, Blade 2, where the vampires can split their jaw into like that, as well as the Strain. Strain is a really good vampire TV show for anyone that hasn't seen it. And then their signature appearance being vile appearance. Let's go ahead and look at what vile appearance is. So vile appearance is the Sea Hag's trait. It is a wisdom saving throw. It's DC 11 for the hag, but we would make it whatever the DC relevant to our monster is, based on the numbers in our quick monster builder. Any creature that starts its turn within 30 feet and can see the creature's form, they have the frightened condition. So that plays in really, really well to this, what we're building out here, this horrific vampiric creature that if you are just within sight of it, there is a chance that you will become frightened. Love that. And then its bonus action ability is a charisma saving throw that can impart a condition. I don't think that we would actually need that. I'd probably change that out for something else, just because we're already dealing conditions as the signature ability. So I'd probably swap that for something else. But loving what this is giving. So I'm going to copy these out, and I'm going to put this into my Stream Monsters thing, because I don't think this is something that I'm going to use in my campaign immediately, but this is definitely the kind of monster that I would make to release in the newsletter or in a future book. And I could so clearly picture this horrific creature in my mind. What time we're on? We're on like 8:30. Let's do 1 or 2 more polls just for funsies, and then we'll call it an evening. So a piscine monstrosity. So this is a fish-like monstrosity that can shed its skin to escape. Very apropos for something fish, but that can't cross running water. That is really interesting. I like that a lot. And then has insect wings and flyby. and then that creates like a weird like hybrid monstrosity. Like this thing was of the sea and has now mutated and has like wings and can fly, but now it can't return to the water, it can't cross running water. So just some horrific, tragic creature. I probably wouldn't keep the counter spell on this because I don't immediately get like spellcasting vibes from it. And then the charisma saving throw and condition. My first thought is frightened, because that's where my brain immediately goes to with charisma saves. But what it could do is have some charisma based save and then have the creature be restrained. So like the idea of being rooted to the spot with either fear or awe or something about this affront to nature has rooted you to the spot. That could be really cool. But having this like flying fish thing that can't cross water is very funny. So we've got another option for a fungal monstrosity that can enter your dreams. That is weak to cold damage, and then has potentially an unhinged jaw, barbed spines, or a chitinous shell. None of those really jump out to me. Neither does the limited amphibiousness. Like nothing beyond can enter dreams and kind of weak to cold damage really speaks to me. Like the fungal can enter dreams and weak to cold damage gives me the ideas of the mind flayer in Stranger Things. That sort of spory nature, the mist, the fog, being able to enter into your mind and like go into your dreams, and then the like being heat sensitive or cold sensitive gives me that kind of vibe. So this creature I would imagine as being something that is kind of like constantly shedding, so it has like a spore cloud around them. So some monstrosity that has like an emanation, and if you go within the emanation and you pass the save, if you fail the save, then you are infected with these spores, and the creature then has some access to your dreams. And then tie its abilities to that and just kind of ignore the second half of the generator, which again is the benefit of something like this. You take what you want and you leave the rest. Let's try and get an option that isn't a monstrosity. He says, after wanting more monstrosities earlier. There we go. I was more of concerned that monstrosity was going to be all it could give us. But no, it can give us more. That's fine. So an abyssal humanoid that is immune to non-magical weapons, has no reflection, has horns and hooves. Immediately we're just getting a devil vibe. Or like a demon, like classic kind of Luciferian vibes. Has an aura of fear, can hide in dim light and darkness, and can counterspell. That's just like all I can see in my mind is Tim Curry's Devil from Legend. That's all that I can see in my mind from that. That's all that pictures like conjures up for me. But that's a lot of options that are very, very thematically appropriate. A flaming humanoid that's immune to deafness. Well, I'd hope so if they were on fire. That has external heart and or organs. That's an interesting weakness to have when you're currently on fire. And then either has a serpentine lower body, barbed spines, or tusks. Those particularly speak to me. The living shadow ability, and then an uncanny dodge. I don't think that's an amazing one. Let's do one more and see whether it gets me an option that is speaking to me. So a patchwork monstrosity. I really like the patchwork modifier. I think you can do a lot with it. So a monstrosity that is a patchwork of other creatures or other monstrosities or others of its kind, that is immune or resistant to cold, is weak to salt, so you get that folklore vibe to it. The players can, through the course of the steady action or investigation, find out that this thing is weak to salt, do salt rings around buildings and things like that. It could have an extra head, or it could be a shape changer, could be both. Its natural form might be extra headed, and it could shape change. Perhaps because it's patchwork, there's always one element of it that's like a tell. So if it had like a strange hand, that hand always remains even if it shape changes. So it's always got a way of you being able to spot it if you look close enough. And then it can confer fire resistance. So given that it is immune or resistance to cold, I would probably change that to confer cold resistance or make it immune to fire, just so that it matches up. So this thing has an affinity to one of the elemental damages, and it can confer that to others. So it is a patchwork creature, shape changing options, and has that conference ability, which I'm getting the vibes of. This is a thing that wants to create more like it. So getting Bride of Frankenstein vibes, where this creature has been created. It is a patchwork amalgamation of other creatures, and what it wants now is to create more like itself. And then it gets a bonus action spell, so that's from the available list of bonus action spells, and its reaction would be counter spell, so it's a magical in nature as well. So that could be a really interesting thing. I might even change that from monstrosity to humanoid, because the Frankenstein vibes fit too well, I think. So this caster, this wizard or this mage who has been put together from multiple pieces and is now trying to create more like themselves and can confer their abilities on others, could be a really interesting thing. But I think that's where we will call it for the evening for that. I'm pretty pleased with the general kind of state of how this generator is working conceptually. Like I do want to go through and spend some more time like refining all the entries and making sure that it's pulling the right things at the right frequency. But a lot of that will be like off-screen noodling to make sure that it's all working how I want it to. But once it is done, I will be making it available through the newsletter, which you can get for free by signing up for it on the website, which is linked in the chat, wherever the chat appears, next to me, below me, wherever it is, over on my website. And once this is available, I will be putting out an email to the subscribers of the newsletter to say, hey, the updated version is out, but you can get all of the other stuff that's in the GM toolkit by signing up for that right away. The only other thing that I have to like shill for this week is that I am going back to Kickstarter in like 9 days, something like that, to fund the class cheat sheets for D&D 2024. So this is an update. If we go ahead and click on it, I'll show you the landing page for this. So I did a bunch of cheat sheets for D&D 2014 several years ago, and ever since the new edition has been announced, people have been asking me to do ones for the new edition. So we're going back to Kickstarter to fund production for those, and it's all about helping you learn and play D&D 24 just easier than ever. So it's a cheat sheet for every class of the SRD, so the 12 core classes, and then we've got a whole bunch of stretch goals planned to make just general learning and teaching the game as easy as possible. My secret goal for this whole thing is that when we're done, we'll have like a digital package that a GM can get that is just packed with all the resources to teach the game to new players in as approachable and as accessible a way as possible. Because like, I really like the new starter set, but it is a lot, it's a big chunky box, and sometimes when you want to introduce a new group to the game, you don't want to put like 5 pounds of box down and be like, hey guys, this is what we're going to play today. You just want to put a couple of sheets of something much more low-key in front of them to be like, you don't need to stress as much about what we're about to do. It's not that big a deal. So that's what I hope by the end of this we'll be able to do. But we're starting with the base sheets and I'm very excited. I think it's going to be a whole heap of fun. So if you're interested in that, you can sign up to get notified when we go live. All the pre-sign-ups help, do the whole hype thing. You've been on the internet, you know how this thing works. But yeah, I will be back hopefully this time next week. I'm going to try and get back into the habit of Sunday evenings being our stream night. I figure because most folks are not working on a Sunday evening, it's a little bit chiller. We can just do some more stuff like this where we build out tools to use or do world building and collaborate on that in the chat. So if you are new here and you aren't already, do all of the YouTubey things, subscribe and like. Again, you're smart people, you know what you're doing. And yeah, I will see you next time. But until then, happy gaming.